Industrialism. In the last few hundred years, another revolutionary adaptive strategy has arisen: industrialism. Industrialism followed the development of agriculture and has laid the groundwork for what we now think of as globalization. Industrialism has several important characteristics that are distinct from other ecological systems. A predominant one is a shift from human and animal energy to the use of varying types of fuel to power work. Unlike other adaptive strategies, the food supply of industrialism is characterized by massive-scale agriculture and agropastoralism, dominated by machines and performed by very few members of society. As part of the shift to this economic system, labor is bought and sold and replaces work, which is the activity you do to provide yourself with food, items, and other services. Agriculture's reorganization of societies into cities, states, and empires is taken even further with industrialism. As fewer and fewer people produce food, as machines took over their roles and land was increasingly privatized, and instead were pushed into wage labor in increasingly dense urban areas, there was a centralization of the workplace and corresponding patterns of urbanization. Urbanization drove further stratification of health and wealth along class lines. Very few people are now involved in producing food or other items they use, so there's a greater need to live near centers of trade where jobs and products can be obtained. The growth of larger city-states came with a higher population density, as more and more people settled in these new urban centers. The large-scale food production could support a larger population, although that population was often less healthy than previous generations. Early industrialism mainly produced a foundation of tools, infrastructure, transportation, and textiles. Later industrialism merged with supply and demand capitalistic market economy, resulting in a crisis of overproduction, with incentives for finding new markets and producing more non-durable and consumer goods. The social characteristics of early industrialism also drove cultural changes. Foremost among these was the accumulation of wealth, which created massive disparities between the richest and the poorest people. This, in turn, created a system of institutionalized inequality, where the wealthy can consume in great quantity and the less powerful bear the costs of undercompensated labor, ecocide, and consequences from conflict or natural disaster. The real total social costs can be allocated to the weaker group or region, and class segregation in housing and work means the social and environmental impacts are not visible to some and not taken seriously by elites. In theory, industrialism is a meritocracy, where the most talented and hardest working gain the most power in society. But in practice, those with wealth have power over those who don't, and social class lines are very challenging to cross. The predominant social framework of industrialism is competition, as expressed through the ideas of capitalism and the free market. As early industrialism gave way to later industrialism, the inherent inequalities of this system only grew stronger. The gap between the haves and the have-nots has only grown larger, and the impact on the have-nots has only gotten worse. Socio-ecological impacts include ecocide, global health disparities, and worldwide climate change. Labor impacts of industrialism include institutionalized inequality, outsourcing, and the development of sweatshops among more vulnerable labor populations. Structural impacts of industrialism include poverty, increased food and safety precarity to all but the wealthiest, and widespread hunger. In an industrialist system, people's lifestyles shift toward a culture of consumption, spurred by advertising and credit. The perception is that industrialism supports less restricted lifestyles with more free time than other adaptive strategies. But the reality is that hunter-gatherer groups spend less time working to meet their basic needs and have more time to spend relaxing with family, telling stories and oral histories, and creating art and music. The early stages of post-industrialism have seen an increase in service industry jobs and decline of product manufacturing, the increased value of innovative theoretical knowledge over pragmatic knowledge, and the shift in infrastructure from transportation to communication. There are growing changes to how we labor and where, and how we are socially valued is increasingly connected to education. Societies are reorganizing yet again, but it's hard to see what the full social, ecological, and cultural effects will be.